You don't have another name.
Views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of WBAS-FM.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are about to get started. Share, share, share. Y'all see this big on mic?
And here are your hosts, Shay and Yolanda.
Good evening and welcome to Hearts and Hills. It is a wonderful Thursday. Do you know why it's wonderful? Because we get to be here with you, to hang out with you and to share with you. I am one of your hosts, Shay Robinson. Remember, you can always follow us, and we need you to follow us on social media at Facebook, at YouTube, at Instagram, at Hearts and Hills, the number one. Get connected to us, learn what's going on behind the scenes, and share with us. And also tonight, if you want to call in, you can call in at 334-269-6785. That's 334-269-6785. And of course, we have our beautiful co-host Yolanda and the Pastor Willie Welch hanging in with us tonight.
Hey, Shay.
Hey.
It's good to be here. You remember we talked about last week that we were talking about faith through the fight and how we have to overcome some obstacles and challenges. So we talked about not that we were going to stop talking about that subject or that topic. However, we went and we pulled somebody out. And that somebody is our dear friend, Pastor Willie Welch III. He is the former pastor of Greater Washington Park.
First Baptist.
Oh, First Baptist.
First Baptist, Greater Washington.
Thank you. First Baptist, Greater Washington Park. And so, look, he's been pastoring for over 35 years.
35 years.
Oh, 35 years.
35 years, 4 months.
Okay, you got it down pat.
Down pat.
I love it. I love it. So who best to know about faith and obstacles and challenges and all of those things? And so we brought him on so we can share for him to share his wisdom and his stories, because I know he has a lot of stories. Now, Pastor Welch is originally from Birmingham,
Alabama.
Tell us. Come on.
I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. Have been to Montgomery only once to drop my cousin off at Alabama State with his mama. And Reverend C.D. Patterson used to let me preach his vacation. And his wife told her sister at First Baptist, we got a boy up here y'all need to hear. And they called me in May, and I couldn't come till September because I was booked up. That impressed them. And from then on, it's just been a good journey. At First Baptist, Birmingham didn't want me to be a pastor because they said I was single. So, and it worked out in my favor that I didn't get called to some churches up there because First Baptist gave me a chance, and I had great success. And I don't think that if anybody asked me after 35 years, I only had a couple of days of hard times because the great things were set up. Reverend Rodney Wilkerson asked me when I told him I was retiring, what one thing you think you would have done that you didn't get done? And the only thing I said to him was that I should have been more diligent about writing policies and procedures. I think that's one of the things when you look at faith and the reason we have so many fights and how we can better fight Satan. We can't fight Satan because we're so busy a lot of times fighting in the church.
Each other, right?
And we're fighting each other. But for 35 years, we didn't fight each other. And then once I saw the handwriting on the wall, then I decided that I would do what the scripture says. When my time was up, then we partied on a great note. They took good care of me out the door, and I'm satisfied with Jesus. And that's one of the things I think pastors have to realize, that we are only at a place for a season.
That's right.
And there's a there's a passage that says, and there rose a Pharaoh that knew not Joseph.
That's right.
So once, all of the people I baptized, when I got there, 33 people voted for me as pastor.
Mhm.
That Sunday they voted, 33 people voted.
How many people were there though?
It wasn't more, they didn't have 50 members on roll.
Okay.
And we grew our church to 1,000. We probably ended up with 500. Pandemic took us down. The struggle took us down further because people they don't come to church. And that's one of the things I think every church has to realize. People don't come to church to fight. They come to church to get relief from the day-to-day struggle, and rather than come in and fight about who's going to be in charge of the money, who's going to be in charge of praying, who's going to be in charge of hiring a musician, they'll just go somewhere else. They won't say anything.
Well, Pastor, that's a good place to part for a second. So why do we fight in church? From your perspective, being a pastor all these years, why the fight? And we know ultimately it's the enemy, but why the fight? Why do we allow it to happen?
Well, I think we fight for different reasons. I had a successful run because, and I had a chairman, he was one of the most successful businessmen in Montgomery, Gregory Calhoun, the late Gregory Calhoun. So when he was my chairman, we worked hand in glove. I think because he was so into doing great things himself that he expected greatness from his church. So I think sometimes in the church we fight because we put the wrong people in charge. And we compare the church to the world. Now, in the world, we want to make all the money we want to make. But then when we hire a musician in the church, and we'll fight about what the musician makes, but we want a perfect praise for the Lord on Sunday morning. Sometimes it's even the pastors are at fault. We want all of the money for us, but then we don't want to share the wealth with anybody else. My mode of operation was at First Baptist for 35 years was that the scripture that says muzzle not the ox that treaded out the corn is not just for me. The janitor is treading out the corn because I want a clean restroom on Sunday morning. The guy who cuts the grass, I don't want to volunteer cutting the grass. I want somebody that I can hold accountable if the grass is not cut. So some of our fights in the church is because we put the wrong people in the wrong places. And then some of us, we don't, it's a book called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes.
And we don't inspect the cheese often enough. The cheese station C was good at first, but if you try to keep going back to the same station, you'll find the cheese was stale. I had a pastor ask me recently, well, you gone, what do you think the church could do to get back up to 1,000 members? If they go and hire the musician that you first hired, do you think that would get the church back up to 1,000? I say, he's 50 years old now, so he couldn't go on Alabama State like he did when I hired him because he's not going to have the connection to the students. They're not going to want to be dealing with a 50-year-old man. My best recruiter moved to Tennessee that went to Alabama State. He stayed over here 6 years on the 4-year program, but he could fill up a bus. Every time I put that bus at the Acadome, he would fill it up and bring students to the church on Sunday.
Let's dissect some things, because you said a lot of things that are important and are very impactful. One of the things that you said that I would like to dissect is putting the wrong people in the wrong seat. And so I've said that a lot I know exactly what you mean. And that even for pastors, because there's a season for everything. And so in this season, it was a season for change. Because and when you mentioned Pharaoh, there's a certain point that God allows his people, his servants, his leaders to take the people
to a certain spot.
To a certain spot. And so we're at that spot. We're at that crossroad. Let's talk about some things specifically in your life, that some challenges that you face, or some things that you learned along the way, the journey, before you got to First Baptist, Greater Washington Park. Tell me about your life in Birmingham. Let's talk about that, because that's important to bring you here.
Birmingham, I grew up, I lived in Loveman Village Project. My mama had 5 children. We walked past a small church every Sunday, and we went to the big church on top of the hill, South Fullerton. My mama was 30 years old. She ended up marrying the preacher, who was 60 years old. They then had 5 additional children. So I grew up in a preacher's house from 5 years old on. He said you couldn't play Monopoly because it was gambling, because you had the dice in it. But South Philly,
did you play?
We played because we had 5, had 5 big children. So every night we played, somebody had to stand on the door and watch for my daddy to come. If he's coming, then you put the dice up. But he gave us a strong foundation in the Lord. And so even though he was hard at home, the things I learned at South Fullerton under him, one sermon that I'll never forget. First time I heard, I have been young and now I'm old. And I've never seen the righteous forsaken or a seed begging bread. And he said, "Oh, shucks, y'all don't talk to suit me today." And so I grew up in a church. I joined this senior choir before I was 14 because they wouldn't pay a musician for the youth choir. So I sing with the older choir at an early age. Then I just kept going to church, and then I got a paper route, met a man named Reverend John Mason, and the first sermon I heard him preach was good news in bad times. Unto us a son is given, unto us a child is born. And he was somebody's preacher. So even though he was my boss at the paper house, you start following him around. He preached so good until I left my daddy's church and joined his church. My daddy's rule was, I know I'm tough on you all, so as y'all grow up, y'all gonna want to go off to another church. I don't care where you go, as long as you go somewhere. And so I got my real training at New Mount Zion Baptist Church, because he exposed me to the National Baptist Convention. One of the things as a young preacher, I saw all of the national preachers at an early time in my ministry, and it made me who I am. I never settled for just the average.
The average, yeah.
I was taught at the convention every year in June. We would go the Monday after Father's Day to the National Congress, and I learned to build a sermon.
When did you accept your calling?
I accepted my calling in actually I was called preaching in the 9th grade, but I didn't accept my calling until I was 22.
First sermon.
My first sermon was good news in bad times.
I knew it. I knew it because that was impactful.
That was it.
Good news in bad times.
I had no good news, but I got some good news in bad times, and that went really, really well. I had basically lost my vision, and I couldn't see. And so I said to God, one Sunday I spoke 3 places, just bootlegging, as Reverend Mason would call it. And so I had paid somebody 3 times to drive me to the churches. So the last church I spoke at, I was waiting on the young man to come back.
What age were you Let's talk about that. What age when you start losing your vision?
I knew I was losing my vision in the 11th grade
Mm-hmm.
because I was in ROTC, and then I was supposed to shoot. They had a shooting the rifle,
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and
Lord.
then when I looked out my right eye, I couldn't see the target.
Wow.
So I switched it over to my left hand, and 10 children, not adequate medical care.
Right.
Um, Finally, Miss Mason, Reverend Mason's wife, say something wrong with you, Welch. I'm working at the service station. She said, I noticed you couldn't see the pumps anymore. So she got me to a doctor, and he told me I needed an eye transplant. Um, and I got my first eye transplant was 19, and my mama still didn't know this didn't go to Birmingham, does it?
Yes, it does.
Well,
Yep.
she probably did. But anyway,
But how did at 19, understanding what you were going through? I mean, that has to be really tough to at 19 to realize that I'm going blind. What, if you can remember, where did it take you, and how did that drive you to God?
well, it probably drove me closer to God. I've always had a good faith. I've known the Lord since I was a little boy. Once I came to Jesus, now I didn't have to get rebaptized. Once I came to Him, I was there.
Yeah, you are saved. I need to be rebaptized now.
But once I couldn't see, um, it made me sometimes sad. I couldn't do the things that my young friends were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I basically had to hang out with the older people because I'd ride around with them on Sunday night. And one time I said to Bessie Lewis, I'll be glad when I get my eye transplant. She said, well, don't say that. You don't know how that'll work out. But finally, my mama realized I couldn't see well because I had to take her to work one night. She's talking about he scared me to death. So I called the doctor and asked him there again, not having resources. And the man wrote me a prescription when Miss Mason took me to the eye doctor for contacts. But I have been used to like going to Parisians or see or somewhere to get your glasses. I never seen nobody write no prescription for glasses. And so I'm like, what am I going to do with this piece of paper? And he said, I thought your son was wearing contacts. And when I got there that day and he put that contact on my eye, and it hurt.
Yeah.
The top shelf, and I can read that box. I said, I can endure this. And so,
Pastor Welch, I want you to tell me, having difficulty in seeing, being called to preach, how did that correlate with you trying to read the word?
Well,
Because
I asked Essel Davis, late Essel Davis, he used to pastor Tabernacle. Reverend Carl Jones, he was about my age then, did his trial sermons. I went over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked Reverend Davis, I said, Reverend Davis, can I be called to preach and can't see? He said, you can be blind and preach.
Right.
And he said, Fanny Crosby wrote Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine.
Jesus.
And say she was blind and she wrote Just As I Am without one plea. And he went on down that road. So then I was caught. And what I started doing was I told God that last day I spoke those 3 times. If I've been called to preach, I need to be able to get where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
I need to see. And I need to have a car. And I want a green car with sport rims.
You were specific.
And God gave me a green car with sport rims on it, gave me the contact lens. And so
Wow.
from then on.
So you're driving?
I drive everywhere now.
Oh, he drives everywhere.
Uh,
Now, if you just tuning in, we have the Pastor Willie Welch that's hanging in with us. That's just retired from First Baptist Church, Greater Washington Park. He is dropping knowledge with Shay and Yolanda on Heartsea Hills at WVAS. Now, Pastor, you were just talking about your experience in getting your first eye transplant and moving forward. You had you talked about your very first sermon. What was the title again?
Good news and bad times.
Now it's bad times now. What's the good news and the bad times?
Well, the good news and bad times now is that if we trust in the Lord, if we lean not to our own understanding, if in all our ways we acknowledge Him, He will direct our path. And even in this pandemic, even in the season as I was getting ready to leave First Baptist,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things they said to me, he's not saying anything. They have anything to say. I had to trust in the Lord. I had to lean out to my own understanding and in all my ways acknowledge Him. And He gave me what I needed. They gave me everything I asked for. And He made it good for me. And I left them a pattern. If they follow it, that's up to them. It's not on me. It'll be on them. I gave them what God gave me.
I love this scripture, how it was your first sermon and it's carried you all through the years and how you've used it in different places to uphold your faith. Now you're in this season and you're having to have faith into your next season. But before we get there, because I want to talk about what's happening next, let's go from Birmingham to Montgomery. So you in Birmingham, you preaching all over because you can't get any sermons. I mean, you can't go to the churches until September, and you finally get the call here in Montgomery. What was that like for you?
Well, it was exciting. I got a call in May. They wanted me to come in May to preach. I couldn't come in May because I just was booked up till September. I said, ma'am, I'd like to come, but I'm really booked up till September. She said that impressed her, that an associate would be booked that solid. And so she said, well, will you come the second Sunday in September since that's your first free Sunday? I said, I'm glad to. First Sunday I came, I really didn't think they would call me as pastor because nobody else had. So I had a red bow tie on, black suit, white shirt, had a part in my head, and I talked about my daddy's sermon, the owner and the mission of the church. If you didn't want a pastor, don't bother about calling me. This is God's house and God's church, Matthew 16. Upon this rock, I will build my church. And so they enjoyed it. They called me back. They cut it down. They had about 25, 30 guys at that time vying for the church. They cut it down to 3. So when they cut it down to 3, they put me in the worst spot because now I got to preach 2 Sundays in a row. Next guy preach 2 Sundays in a row. And next guy preach 2 Sundays in a row. So it'll be, when they vote, it will be 6 weeks since they've heard me.
Right.
So if this new guy, the last guy, has a good Sunday, then when they vote Monday, well, he shouted us yesterday, they're going to be emotional. Well, the first sermon I preached was happiness in the valley of weeping. They who passing through the valley of Baker make it a well. And as you pass through this valley of not having leadership, you need to put your trust in God. The last sermon I preached, I said, well, now they got to have something to remember me by. I preached, give me this mountain. And Joshua, now therefore, give me this mountain. Caleb said, I'm old and well stricken in year, but I'm well able. Now, Joshua, give me this mountain. And I said, I don't care who you hear after me. The Lord told me to tell you to give me this mountain. And I said, he's going to need courage. He's going to need faith. And if he has courage and faith, God will help him move it on. And the rest was history.
The rest was history. Wow. Give me this mountain.
Yeah. And they quoted that the last Sunday I left. They still remember that sermon 35 years.
Wow.
That is awesome. Listen, audience, we are having a wonderful conversation about faith and challenges
Yep.
with Pastor Willie Welch the third.
The third.
The third. And so he leaned over and said, "Put the third down."
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The third.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so give me this mountain.
I
There
love
has
it.
been a lot of mountains, I'm sure, that you had to climb.
Yeah, and one of the things, see, once I got there, the building was all but condemned.
We love talking to pastors, don't we?
The building was all but condemned. They had no money. The bathrooms were, you could go in the bathrooms and see the ground. And
Let's talk about the location real quick. The location is where?
in Greater Washington Park, it was better known as the Chicken Shack.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing you had to do was build people because they were in a depressed neighborhood. And the value of the houses there were, the highest house value was $19,000. And I said, now, black churches are funny. There's a book called 10 Stupid Things That Keep Churches from Growing. And one of the things it says is you hold on to a bad location. But if you want to get voted out in a black church, they had told me Dr. Martin tried to move the church up to Mobile Highway, a better location, and they voted him out. So if I know you're going to vote the preacher out,
Don't move the church.
Don't move the
Don't move the church.
I said, now if we're going to build a $1 million church in this depressed community, then the next thing we're going to have to do is build houses to bring up the values.
Mm-hmm.
When I left there, the value of a house was $106,000.
Wow.
You can the average house is $106,000. You can check it at the probate. Now, what they're going to have to keep doing, the fight never quits.
That's right.
What they're going to have to do, keep doing, is keep selling houses. Because if you don't keep selling houses, one of the things Pharaoh did was blacks don't accumulate wealth in houses because we don't move. We had 2 bedrooms on and a big den. Whereas now you put $40,000 in a house, but your value didn't change over $5,000.
Before we start
You better
talking
say
about
that.
your community involvement and development, I want you to take me back to the church. Take me back to the church. You said I had to start building people.
Well, the
And
first
so,
thing,
because I remember you started off with 50 members, 30 voted you in.
33 and less than 50.
And okay, let's start. How did you walk in? You're how old? 28?
28. I was 28.
28 years old. So let's talk. I walked in the church at 28 years old, and what did you see? You began to talk about it, the building, how the church, the sanctuary looked. I mean, and there was a few people. The
Right.
community was not in good condition.
Right.
What did you say? When they voted you to become the pastor there, what was it like? What did you say when you walked through those doors that first Sunday morning? And you was like, I got work to do.
I said the first sermon I preached as pastor was Bring John Mark over there in Acts, where
Mhm.
Paul and John Mark fell out. And the Bible said, and the contention was sharp. But over there in Timothy, Paul says, bring Timothy, bring
Right.
John Mark with you now, because he's now profitable to me, to the ministry. I may not have been your choice as pastor, but now we all need to bring out John Marks now and work on one accord. And so from then on, it was just really, the deacons were really, they had a bad name, the deacons. But I start, every time I went out, I get the deacons, come on, ride in my car. And so we start forming a relationship. And rather than fighting them, I started bonding with them.
Point number one.
Yeah, you got to learn
Form a relationship.
And so then things started moving. I said, well, we gotta renovate this building. First we gotta renovate this building we're in before we could attract somebody.
How long was the church there?
The church had been there 48 years when I got there, and but it was falling down.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I did was to attract people. I came over here. I met a young man and started paying him $100 a Sunday to be my musician. They said, that's more money than you can make almost. I said, don't worry about it, the Lord provide. And so once he got to be my musician, Willie Vincent brought everybody in the music building.
Hold on. That's important. That's an important point because we don't like paying our musicians.
Yeah.
And so you knew that it was important to have a musician in the church.
Well, the black church, you're not going to grow a church without a good musician. Now, the day and time we're living in, the music is different. I had one of my friends laughing Sunday. I say, yeah, the country preacher, but y'all sing contemporary. You know, I like lifting holy hands, Lord, I love you. but now you got to every line in trouble in my way. You got to. I like some contemporary. But you got to get grandmama's hat at some point in the service.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I did was I got me a good music staff, and then I start paying. I start staffing.
Yeah, it's important to staff, and I love it. You know, music. The enemy was a musician. You know what I mean? He never the enemy.
Well, I think we ride that horse a lot. But now the enemy could be in the pulpit sometimes.
Amen.
He could be anywhere. Yeah.
And he can be up there preaching every Sunday morning.
No, I'm just saying how important music is in the church, and sometimes we don't realize that because music drives us. You know, and I tell everybody, when you listen to a love song, you want to be in love. When you listen to a song that make you dance and move around, you want to do that. And the same thing with worship. You know, when you get to praise and worship and having a good old church, you want to have that music, and you need to have somebody there who's sensitive enough to understand where the spirit is going,
and not fighting with the pastor.
Yeah.
See, one of the things I always had control over my musicians. Now and we're friends today. One of my musicians that I fired, he said, I said, you gonna come back and play for me on in April? He said, whatever Sunday you want me to come, I'll be glad to come, Pastor. And so that Sunday, a girl was hugging him, and she said, I'm so glad to see you. I said, all right, now it's time to start church. Don't make me fire you. He said, Lord, he going to fire me again, Lord. But we stayed family because I had a certain vision for the church. Now, musicians have to realize that I'm going to give you your square to work around in my vision. I don't care. I'm not coming to choir rehearsal. I'm not going to pick your song. I always ask them, what's your song list for the day? If they had 5 songs, I'll say, well, I could close my sermon on this song. Since I know you didn't practice it, why not pick one of them? And so you're being flexible. I didn't hire a full-time secretary. And the devil, well, what else need a full-time secretary for? Well, now, when your children need letters, for scholarships and things of that nature, I need somebody who's on staff that can write. And I tell anybody that Rondre Young helped build my ministry as my secretary for 20 years. She ran out and recruited Deltas, and she brought more people into the church. And that's one of the things you have to do. She joined the church because her mama came to my installation from Birmingham. There were 5 churches that brought their buses full of people to my installation. She couldn't even get in that Sunday because
it was so
packed. It was so small. But she came back the next Sunday, and she stayed there through those 35 years. And so one of the things is you got to build people. Another guy, John Owens, said to me the reason he joined the church was because he came from a church in the country, and every time they called the pastor, they said, well, what's your vision of the church? Oh, I'm going to build a new building. He said, how they going to build a building? They don't even know the folks.
How long? Let's unpack this.
That's good. That's a good comment, that building people really makes a difference in ministry. And I think that's one of the things I've known over the years that you've done. And you act up too in the pulpit. I love to hear you joke, and you're a funny pastor.
But if people say that, I've never tried to be funny. I mean,
just natural.
I just never, when I'm writing a sermon, I never sit down and think I'm gonna be funny right here.
I believe you. That's just part of your personality.
I just let go with the spirit.
Pastor Welch.
Yes.
Pastor Welch, this is a question that I know that I want you to answer it. I want you to give me a straight answer. I don't want you to beat around the bush with this answer. Because one of the things that you mentioned early on in the conversation, that they had a problem in Birmingham because you were not married. Let's talk about that. All these years, you were able to preach and not ever get married.
Not ever.
What was
Hallelujah,
up with that?
Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Not really.
Well, after a certain point, they didn't want me to be married. I was everybody's husband.
Mm-hmm.
I went to those more debutante balls and danced with the girl for her dad. See, that's one thing. The mamas knew I'd take you to the dance and shake your hand, put you in the car, pat you on the head. Go on now. I got one lady, we laugh about it now, talking about I knew what we were there for. We were to take care of my daughter. They never wanted me.
Never been close to getting married.
No. Not since I've been at the church. No, and I'm too close now to my journey's end now. They came up with the saying at First Church was, he ain't married nobody, he'll take care of your children, he'll help take care of you, but he ain't married nobody. Saying, well, really, if you really want to turn him on, let that cement truck come down here and pour some cement and let us add on something. He'll be happy. And then one of the things I kept saying to them, the old deacon, he said, how you gonna pastor us church without a wife? I said, well, Doc, how many sermons did your last pastor wife preach? She ain't preach none. I said, well, then what's gonna be the problem?
Do you think that's one of the biggest challenges we have, like in the church, like we get so hung up on what's happening in the pastor's life versus where the pastor can lead?
Right. And I think I carried myself. See, I didn't parade women in First Church. There was only one girl that they really knew I liked. But I laugh with her now because I'm 64 and she might have turned 49. So I told her, I like you now, but I'm on up the road, I'm gonna be old and you're gonna still be young. So you need to go and find you somebody, baby. And we laugh about it.
I can only imagine what you meant by that, Pastor.
Yeah, I'm old and you young. It just don't. Yeah, she's still 49 and I'm 64. You do the math.
I got it.
You got it. So they never pressured me about that because we were always doing things.
Yeah.
We were always doing things. I said to the trustees and the deacons on my way out, I said, now, you got this new crowd in here talking about they want to have money in the bank and we still in debt. I said, now, if you get money in the bank, that's easy to do. But you won't build people. You won't build a community. You got to spend money. People are not just going to come to your church. They're not going to come to your church if you just call an old guy. If you look in Montgomery now, we had 5 pastors to die. Okay.
Name them.
First Baptist Church. You got Raymond Thomas just died. Farrell Duncan died. Ross is getting ready to retire, and Willie in July. I understand some couple other pastors are leaving.
E. Baxter Morris.
Yeah.
So
For
you
praying.
now you're gonna have to get a young man. You got the Courtney Meadows to compete with, who's doing an excellent job. You got the Lee Walkers. If people got the choice to go to a church, they going where these young folks. Young folks are going to gravitate to where the young folks are.
That's right.
So if that's
Did you ever change throughout the years in your style of preaching because you saw that the times were changing? Remember, I don't know if y'all did this, because I was raised up in a Baptist church. Remember, on Mother's Day, we wore white, and then everybody who had a living mother, we had red roses or carnation.
I know.
And then you remember, but that was like,
Yeah,
you remember that?
My mama used to say, go down there and bring off Miss Carter's rose.
Because you had to have a red rose or a white rose.
Red for your living mother.
And white for the deceased.
We had one lady that did that at First Church. I used to laugh, and she'd get her husband be wearing a shirt and have a big flower pin on it.
But you know, that was back in the day, and then you noticed that it just went away.
The major change I had would have been you.
Women preachers.
Because when I came, the Baptist doctrine said we didn't endorse women preachers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they taught us at the Baptist college, and they taught us.
Did they say why?
They was just.
They just didn't know.
For they being ignorant of God's righteousness, have
Right.
not submitted themselves to the righteousness of the law. They went about to establish their own righteousness. So,
A lot of them still believe that.
a lot of them still believe it. One of the things Charles Thomas, basically at the Montgomery Ministers Union, we said, we're not going to ever talk about women preachers. Because if y'all try to show us a scripture where they can't preach, we going to show you one where they can.
Yahoo to Charles Thomas.
Yeah, we gave them hell. So I say the best thing for us to do is talk about Jesus. Now, what I did was I said when the late Reverend Bozeman came to the association and said, we found out in the state convention that ain't part of our bylaws. He say, so they took Dexter back into the association. They took People Baptist back in to the association because they had put them out.
Because of the women. Because they allow women in the pulpit.
Right. And so then my first lady preacher, Renee Gibson, then Loretta Ferguson came. And they were really worried about what I was going to do when Renee announced her calling. I said, well, back then, that was what we would believe. Y'all said y'all wanted to be in an association. So, but once they changed, then I gravitated to accepting. One of the things I asked my deacons when I was getting ready to make exit, I say, now, when you're looking for a new pastor, what's our gay population at the church? Oh, you know what the Bible says about that? I say, yeah, I know what the Bible says about fornication too. I know what the Bible says about you only to have a girlfriend and got a wife. But they say, what that got to do with? I say, well, if let's say 25% of our population was gay, and you call a guy that's gay bashing every Sunday, then he's going to run off 25% of your members, and then that's going to run off, and that 25% make up 50% of your tithers.
Wow.
So now you're going to, and see, sometimes one of the things as pastor and building people, you learn a lot of stuff in the study.
Let me ask you something real quick, because I don't want you to skirt over this or walk over this concept. So when you said that the female can come and preach, did you get any pushback from any of your members?
No.
You didn't get any? Come on.
Not really, no. Well,
I know what I'm saying.
They probably not. First Baptist, I trained First Baptist. Don't come to church to hear me.
Okay.
there were months I wouldn't preach one Sunday.
So Pastor Gibson, Renee Gibson, Minister Gibson didn't have any problem. You opened the doors and she preached and everybody accepted her.
Well, nobody would say anything to me.
That's good.
When nobody say anything
That's
to her
good. Okay.
publicly, where they with all associates, they had different
Their favorites.
they had
Right.
favorites and fan clubs, but at the end of the day,
Did you call them fan clubs,
they
Pastor?
got every associate got a
Right.
fan club, and they'll push Jack, and associates have to be careful. Now that fan club that pushes you up to be a Judas will ultimately turn on you.
Yeah, you
better
know
say,
it.
say that one more time,
Yeah.
Pastor.
The one that push you up will turn on
They
you.
will turn on you
Yeah.
because
Right.
see, if you're gonna preach the whole gospel,
Mhm.
at some point you're gonna have to correct them. You can't spend your whole time exhorting, talking about the goodness of the Lord.
You gotta
At some point you're gonna have to challenge them
think better and do
what,
better.
and think better and do better.
I think that's one of the hardest part though of ministry is challenging people when challenging when it's hard. Not challenge them to be better, but challenging them in their wrongness. I think that's really hard. And let me say why. Because people get so offended. They get so offended when you're correcting them or when you are showing them a different way of living.
You're not going to correct them until they know you love them.
That's right.
They got to know you love them.
Right.
They got to know you love them.
Mhm.
If they
For
know
real.
you love them,
For real.
they will let you correct them every time.
You
But
got
if
to catch the fish to clean the fish.
oh, hallelujah! If they don't know you, you'll take some stuff from your husband because he loves you. But now if people don't know you love them,
That's a good point.
then they're not going to let you correct them. One of the things the black church didn't talk about is we think, Nelson Smith say, the only thing we think is sin in the church is sex and drinking. Now, my folk, I never skirted those issues. I preached on sin. You know your sins, fill in the blank. Everybody got a sin. Now, one lady brought me a book on the evil of cussing.
But so you trying to tell me something? You
What?
got some problem with cussing?
It never bothered me.
Pastor Welch?
Everybody
Pastor
knows.
Welch.
My
Confession is good for
my
the soul.
dad and the preacher cussed every day. He got up cussing. So Anthony Dillard, he's in D.C. now. He said, you've been cussing since you was 5 years old. He said, we're going to put on your funeral program where they say he joined church he confessed Christ at an early age. We're going to put on there he was cussing at an early age. But I said, now you went to the convention and bought me a book on cussing. Well, you should have brought one back on having a baby before you got married.
Watch
Did
out.
you have one of that? Did you read it? See, sometimes I tell older folks, I ain't hard on young preachers. I tell them all the time, y'all think y'all invented some of this stuff. I just value, the scriptures say a good name is better than money.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I've learned, that's how I stayed there 35 years. I just did not parade women in and out. I tried to live before them. I lived where I could correct everybody that I had on payroll and everybody at the church. And then, you have to keep good records because when they start talking about why we ain't got no money, I said, well, I spent the money on you.
Amen. Listen, Pastor Willie Welch, he's been giving us, Willie Welch III, he's been dropping this knowledge tonight here on Hearts and Hills with Yolanda and Shay on WBAS. We hope that you have enjoyed. Now, Pastor, if you could believe it, we down to the last 10 minutes. I know it. You've been having a great time with us, so I have a question for you.
Okay.
And now that you are retired, Pastor Willie Welch III, what do you say to the church at large? How do we move forward?
I think we have to move forward with vision. And I think where there is no vision, the people will perish. And I think we have to be aware of every situation. What Hutchinson does, in that book, 10 Things That 10 Stupid Things That Keep Churches from Growing, it says one thing we do is imitate mega churches or large churches. What worked at Free Will had a shown off orderly transition with Reverend Nettles and the new pastor, Reverend Bird. It was in place, they did it, and it moved smoothly. Every church can't do that. One of the things they were talking about me, he wants to pick the new pastor. No, I don't. I just want y'all to pick a great pastor. And, if I've given 35 years of my life to this mission, then I don't want it to go back to what it was. Yeah, and my thing to the churches, as these churches move forward, First Baptist, Weeping Willow, First Baptist, Greater Washington Park, and some other churches that are getting ready to come online, we're going to have to call young men that have a vision
and women,
because now if we can vote for a woman to be vice president of the United States, then
vote her to be a pastor of a Baptist church.
We can vote her to be a pastor of a Baptist church. She has
you put your hat in the ring.
No,
she has to be comfortable enough in her own skin.
Real quickly, I want you to talk about what you did in the community of Greater Washington Park, the housing. Let's talk about that because we're still on air, and I want you to get that in.
We built the houses because I had people that had faith and they had bought into the vision, and they were willing to put their money in. I hosted a state convention, and two ladies paid for that state convention over $50,000 on their American Express card. And I got to pay them back in 30 days. And so how we built those houses, I did all kind of creative financing. Sometimes when the money ran out, George Goodman talking about, he brought two pretty women over here, a payment was due, and they put them Amexes down, and we continue building. So, because you're not going to have the money from the tithes and offering. Perfect example. Hope Street has built that great campus because Reverend McClung had the vision that he built a daycare, a family life center before he built the sanctuary. Most black churches build a sanctuary
and then the life center.
But if you build a sanctuary first, you'll never get the family life center. But First Baptist, I kept building houses and putting people in who had bad credit. And if the first lady living in Riverside, I say, if I build you a house, will you move? She said, yeah. They paid for their house in 19.
How did you get the funding? I know you said creative ways, but I know one idea.
He can't say it on the air.
I can say it. I had the best
Colonial
Bank.
That's
my friend John Ronan, he went on to heaven. John Ronan trusted me. If I went in there, he said, Willie, I can loan you anything up to $99,000 on my signature. So I stayed in the $99,000 range.
Amen.
And so how many homes have you built since you?
We built 15 houses.
Wow.
I say, I don't care. And grandmama said, oh, my record, we'll be there. So whoever you get behind me, if I bought 51 lots at a cost of $10,000 a piece, if I left you 35 lots, if I bought 51 lots and then built 15 houses, then whoever followed me ought to be able to build some more houses. It ought to be there. But you had to have faith. Greg Calhoun, God rest his soul. Anytime I needed something, one time I got so far out there on the limb, the banker said, John said, Willie, your checking account overdrawn $25,000. It got too much, and my boss saw it. We need that money by Monday. I talked to Greg. He said, let me go home, Reverend. He went home and brought that $25,000 back to me that evening. And God rest his soul, Greg made a whole lot of things possible through First Church because he believed in God. And he gave houses. His first house to the church. I was able to help a lot of smaller ministries because Greg did so much for his church. And that's why we were able to. No church makes it by themselves. You got to build these people. You got to build buildings because you got to have somewhere to put the people.
Yeah.
And then you got to build a community. Even though we had a bad location, we were on the grapevine. Blue Man and several other guys said, the mayor came to my retirement saying, now, Reverend, we're going to tell you the truth. We used to come down here, when you first got here, we didn't come down here for no preaching. So you had the best choir and the best looking women down here. And so we came down here to see. So whatever, how to reach the masses, men of every birth. For an answer, Jesus gave the key, and if I be lifted up. So that choir would be lifting him up. He said, I'll draw all men unto men. Amen.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
him up.
That's amazing.
And that's what I kept teaching my folks. If you live Christ, he'll do the drawing.
Yeah.
Ain't no money in the bank. God is not calling the church to have money in the bank.
Yeah.
And so you can't bring to the church what you do at work.
Jesus.
And I wouldn't ever be at a church where I couldn't control the money. He who passed, if you don't hear nothing else on this program tonight, he who passes the money passes the church. Because if you got to go ask the trustees,
say that again.
Can I spend this? They in charge.
Amen.
Who passes the money passes the church.
I had somebody to ask me once, why did the pastor think that they're in charge? And I said, because we are called.
We're called.
I mean, like,
it is.
why would you ask me that? We are called.
We're called.
And God bestow on you a certain mantle of leadership. And people wonder, like, I get questions asked all the time. Why are you so strong? Why are you this? I'm called. I'm called to be a leader.
And if you don't, if the pastor hands are tied, you can't help nobody.
You can't do right.
I built a lady a house and then she didn't have any furniture. So now what you need with a house to sleep on the floor? I went and got her some furniture.
Amen.
I mean,
that's ministry.
That's ministry.
And we miss the mark when we don't see that that's ministry.
And then these people who know not Joseph, a lot of them at the end who got all the blessings in the early years, now they don't want to do anything. People change over time. That's why you got to really readjust your sail. Because people change. There comes a group that knows not Joseph. Joseph told him to put up some corn.
Right.
And everybody, he got second in command. But after a while, a Pharaoh came that didn't remember Joseph.
Didn't know
so
him.
you have to continue to remind. The thing that this young preacher's got to do is remind folk that they need Jesus. I don't care how smart you are at work. I don't care how smart you are on your job. When you come to church, Greg said, I don't need to be nobody at this church. I'm somebody every day. So when I come to church, I want to just worship.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they say, well, Greg said, always, I'll talk to the pastor about it. So
it's the mentality. It's the mentality.
He killed before it got to me.
Yeah.
And then Greg died in 18. Yeah, Greg died in 18, be dead 3 years in October. And once he passed, then, there came that other crowd that knew not Joseph. But now I left on a good note, but still, there were those who went with Moses, but they wanted to go back to Egypt.
Come on.
It's always
they
in the congregation. They want to go back to Egypt.
Right.
They want to go back to
because they're not familiar.
And it's comfortable.
And it's very comfortable.
It's what they know. And man, you listen. We could go on and on, Pastor, but it is now the time. I know you love this conversation.
Y'all were wonderful.
Y'all was wonderful.
Tonight,
you were wonderful.
Yes.
You brought us a lot of information, and you just unpacked a lot of history. And I know that your story will live on and on and on.
And this is all I want to do in retirement. Go about it, talk about what God has done, what he will do, and what he is doing in my life. Somebody told me, say, well, you're going to have to stop giving because you're retired and you're going to run out of money. But if I give, God has promised to take care of me,
Yeah.
Yes, he is. And so I'm no worry. I've been off a month and 9 days, and hallelujah. To God be the glory.
Sleeping late.
Sleeping, and all the bills paid.
Yes.
I'm still going to Waffle House, tipping $20 a day. You know,
look, that's what you call faith. That is what you call faith.
You gotta get out there on it.
Pastor, thank you for exemplifying faith, and thank you for coming and share. Tonight, you've been listening to the Pastor Willie Welch III. Make sure you let someone know that they can always watch this at Hearts and Hills, the #1 on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you, Pastor, for sharing with us. Now, y'all remember that you follow us on social media at Hearts and Hills, the #1. We'll see you next week, same time, same station, definitely not the same way. And remember, whatever you do, do it with all your heart. And ladies, use your inches and step on the enemy's neck when he tries to roar his little head. We love you guys. Keep your faith. We'll see you next week.